Hi, welcome to another episode of the FM Channel podcast. My name's Claudio. I'm the host and one of the co-owners of Alex Young Recruitment. So today I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by Gary Bullen from BGIS. For anybody who hasn't listened before, basically the FM Channel podcast is where I have a chats with industry leaders from the FM and maintenance sector to kind of share their journey as to where they got to, from where they started to where they got to today, in a bit to inspire people in the industry. So Gary, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on and taking the time to do it.
Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure. So before we kind of delve into your story and your journey, can you just give us an overview of what your role is now and who you do it for?
Yep. Hey everybody, my name is Gary Bullen. I am the president of the UK and European business for BGIS. BGIS are a global, technically led FM firm, originating in Canada, but also delivering strongly in Australia, the US, UK, and other parts of Europe. We're about a 500 to 600 employee group here in the UK, going from strength to strength, really focused on data-led maintenance and technology, but really interesting industry to be in at this time.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. Cool. So let's go back to the beginning. And what was the entry point into the FM and maintenance sector? Did you pick the industry or did it pick you? Did you fall into it?
It's funny. A lot of people in FM almost kind of fall into it in very, very different ways. You know, Everybody you chat, whether you're an engineer who kind of flows into FM or a project manager who's flown into FM, even people who've came from administration who've kind of stepped into the FM world. But mine was very, very similar. I studied business analytics at university. It was very much around less of the data, more about what comes out after the data. You know, how do you interpret information and make it into something meaningful? I was really a big fan of Excel back in the day, and I was a bit of a data nerd. And I loved the interpretation of the data afterwards. It was always my, why do we ingest information and what does it mean to us kind of thing. So that's why I specialized in university, and I applied for a number of graduate programs after I left university, one of which was with a company called Johnson Controls.
Yep.
Johnson Controls at the time had a division called GWS, which primarily was FM across the world globally. So, went through a rigorous process with them, was really fortunate to be accepted onto their graduate program. The first placement that I had with Johnson Controls was in a very small little part of London called Feltham. I hadn't ever lived in London before, so I had to Google where it was based and dropped in on a map and said, yep, that's where I'm moving to, having come just outside Manchester. It's a big adjustment for me, and I started on one of their global deals for a prominent technology company, and they needed someone who could kind of take their help desk and their quarterly business reviews and their financial information and interpret into something meaningful, which helped them drove the account forward and helped them give meaningful stats and information out of what they were looking for. So that's how I stepped in, and I sat on that graduate program for about a year, learning the business and working on rotations. And it was a really good entry point into FM for me.
No,
but an industry I really anticipated to be in before, and probably one I didn't really know existed, even though
I was going to ask, actually, did you know that it existed? Did you know what FM and maintenance actually was at that point when you applied?
It's funny, as I think back when I joined, it was one of those industries I guess you take a little bit for granted. What my experience has been. I'd worked in an office, I worked in a call center through the whole of my university, in an inbound call center. So, I'd worked in an office, I had my university buildings, but almost you take for granted that you walk in, it's clean, it's well maintained, it has good air quality, the power's on, and you don't really think that that's an industry. It's a bit like sometimes in the side of IT, when you look at IT, we think of laptops and the software we've got on our laptops, not the infrastructure that sits behind that and the data centers that sit behind that governing it. And FM is a little bit of the same, is that it's what you see in front of you rather than what's happening behind the scenes, which is almost kind of why I quite enjoy it. It's one of those services that adds a lot of value, but necessarily isn't something that is flashy and in your face at times.
Yeah, it's sort of like being the producer or the director of a film rather than the actor.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the man behind the camera, but actually provides a significant value in people's day-to-day life.
So
that was my entry.
Okay, so with that in mind, when you applied, what other industries had you applied to? Do you remember? Where could you have ended up?
You know what? Distinctly, I do. And there's probably a bit of a funny story that I'd got down to the final selection on. One was in the utilities industry, one was in the more banking industry, and then the other one with Johnson Controls. And in the Johnson Controls selection process, the group selection process, and I thought I'd really tanked on the presentation, which I did at the time. I knew I did. And then the other two I felt I'd done really, really well on, but it was the Johnson Controls one I got and the other two I didn't. And actually the feedback that I'd got from Johnson Controls is that, you know, presentations are something you can learn over time, but there's skill sets behind that, which they saw as a long-term investment, which is really fun in a way, because it's part of the job that I really like, which is, there might be parts of people that aren't there just yet, but actually if you see an innate piece inside of them which you can nurture upwards and they can grow into, then that's what you underpin it on. And that was it. I think I'd almost peppered a little bit and said, you know, what good graduate programs are out there, gone for the standard ones. And I'm really glad I actually stepped into FM. Johnson Controls was an incredible company to work for, and they give me a really good footing in and invested really heavily. And, you know, I still know a lot of the people on the graduate program today, and I look at their LinkedIns and when we connect, and they're all in very, very good positions today across the FM, all across the world. And it was a great footing to start on. But FM was not necessarily one that I'd targeted, but one that I'm very fell into.
No, it is a decent industry, and like you say, so many people fall into it from different walks of life, and rarely do you hear people that actually pick the industry. Actually, there are people that have picked it, but I think hopefully more people will select it rather than just fall into it or whatever. So how long were you at Johnson's for, and where did you go after? So
I was with Johnson's, actually, if I roll back, I'm trying to remember the time, the tenure in the industry now. So I kind of finished the graduate program. Unfortunately, part of my graduate program was to be part of the RFP for a very large global deal. So I was part of that RFP, and luckily we won the RFP. Although I played a very minor part, I was with some very incredibly talented people who won the global RFP for them. So I had the chance to join that permanently after my graduate program ended. So I stayed on there for about 4 years-ish, doing the similar role, but almost growing up and kind of doing analytics for EMEA and then Latin America and Asia. So even though it was more data-centric, you know, and reporting-centric, I really got a good global grasp of the business because I was dealing with Latin America on a regular basis, Asia Pacific, the Middle East, Africa. And then I guess I got to a point where I felt that I'd done enough in that space, and where I really liked the idea of moving into operations. And even though I was kind of more of an analytical background, I felt that I'd picked up enough to be able to deliver in ops. So for me, I had a great management team, and they gave me the opportunity to become the facilities manager of a small portfolio for the Mediterranean, of all places. So I picked up running facilities management for a portfolio for a client for part of the Mediterranean region, which again was great fun for me. Lots of travel, very interesting from a cultural perspective as well, learning new territories. And then that grew, and I picked up the Middle East and Africa. So again, I got to spend some time in the Middle East and Africa. Such a vast cultural difference, major learning curve, even from just the way you manage people through to the way that clients and business. And then I was responsible for the UK and Ireland. So I was responsible for a really large portfolio for a large tech company. And then I got the opportunity to fly to Asia. The the company had the account in Asia. I got moved across to be able to kind of, I guess, develop, grow, and the account wasn't in the best position at times, and it had some turnover of staff. Client perception needed improvement, so I got the opportunity to fly over and become the account director for the Asia part of the contract.
Yeah.
And then stayed in Asia 6-7 years, even though I
wow.
think it was originally be 1 or 2. I stayed there for about 6 to 7 years until I came back to the UK to work for BGIS. So I've had this thing about FM is that, it's funny, I had a chat yesterday, and I'll go back to another point you mentioned a little bit earlier about how when I joke around, nobody kind of chooses FM, more falls into it. There's some context behind why I said that. I'll maybe talk about that a little bit later. But
yeah,
the thing about FM is that if you want to shift and move, that's the good thing about it, is that there's a lot of maneuverability.
Mm-hmm.
We have really amazing examples. I won't name names as part of this, but we had a personal assistant as part of the leadership team of BGIS in the UK, who was an incredible talent, and she is now one of our account directors for the business, whereas she was one of our personal assistants only just over 2 years ago. And back to that point of, it's about the qualities you see in someone rather than where they've came from. I mean, I'm a hard services business leader, but I don't come from hard services, but it's about using the traits that you've got to be able to add value in that business. And, we've got some incredible examples of where people have pivoted from, we have a chap who's a fabric engineer or a fabric supervisor, sort of delivering handyman-esque work in his late 50s, who's currently doing an M&E apprenticeship with us, because he wants to step into being an M&E engineer. And, it's really cool that you can kind of filter through. And that's where I was, I guess, lucky in a sense of that, some may say right place, right time, but to get the chance to kind of move around the world gave me a really well-rounded view of, how things operate. And I got the chance to see FM in some incredible countries.
Brilliant.
And meet some just fantastic people, like, probably chatting too much, but, I got to visit.
That's good.
Turbine plants in northern China. I got to visit manufacturing locations in southern India, all the way through to kind of corporate offices in Milan and Dubai. So you almost get a really kind of good cultural nuance in FM as well, because it being kind of partial blue collar. I think, it's a very real industry, and there's some very fun I love the characters in my business. I love the people in our business. It's a very kind of fun place to be, with a lot of kind of great characters, and a lot of people who want to be really successful as well. And I think we're more, FM is a great place to be able to make that pivot really quickly. And, I've been really fortunate in that.
Yeah, brilliant. Whereabouts in Asia did you live then? Where were you based for those 6 years?
Based in Singapore. I was based in Singapore. Based in Singapore, and, although I ran the technology client for a bit, I then moved to a really large, manufacturing client, 50 million square feet across Asia. Everything from FM to real estate to project management. It was a really fun time. Mobilized that supported the mobilization, and then led that account for a couple of years. And then I got a chance to run another technology account for them, of a different customer. A very well-known global Fortune 500 company that had a really large portfolio. And then I almost became a regional lead, looking after the Asia elements for a large portfolio of global clients. So, I was always putting my hand. Yeah. And, I'm always one who looks for new opportunities to kind of put my hand up, whether that is just a chance to grow my own career or...
Cool. So you mentioned that you're not an engineer by trade, and you are your career has been more focused on the hard services side, especially where you are now. Did you ever? Because I've recruited for over 20 years, and I've always found that it's sometimes difficult, or clients push back, employers push back on having someone who's not an engineer by trade to head up, be an account director or an ops manager, because it's a hard services contract. Then they must have an engineering background. Did you find that well, obviously you've progressed fantastically and you've had a great career, but did you find that you might have missed out on opportunity, or that people pushed back on you because you're not an engineer by trade?
Look, I think there's definitely moments, right? There's moments whereby when it gets incredibly technical in a conversation, you need the right people around you.
Yeah.
So that I think it's about the right role for the right person, right? So, what I personally don't do is put myself in a situation where it's a highly technical conversation and it's out of my grasp. So what my job is to have the right people in the room to have the right conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you like an example. So I actually think some of the best account managers come from more like hospitality, hotel, customer service backgrounds, because especially when it comes to leadership, I think it's about the people. And you'll find if you chat to a lot of my leaders around me, what I say to new account managers all the time is use the company, use the expertise, use the people around you as best you can to give you that expertise. I'll give you an example. You might run a business, but you're not an accountant, but we have a financial leader or a CFO within the business. I'm not a human resource expert, but I have a human resource leader. So, I think for holistic leaders, facilities managers, etc., it's about having a good knowledge of what's around you, but then it's having a really strong awareness of leveraging expertise around you, really understanding your customer and understanding your client, and have an ability to multitask and manage ahead. If you've got those innate traits inside of you, actually what it becomes about is using the group of people that we have, or even people within the industry like yourself, Claudio, or others around, which are, recruitment is a really good example, right? Engineering recruitment is a challenge at the moment because there's a serious kind of, I guess, drought in terms of new engineers coming through and the investment going into that. So, our reach as a business only goes so far. So we leverage experts in the industry like yourself, Claudio, and others to be able to expand that reach. It's the same for me. It's about having good knowledge around you, but using and pulling on resources or people or experts in the industry, or even suppliers. Even our best engineers, Claudio, they still use SMEs within the industry to support them. Even some of our best technicians, our best mechanical engineers, our best electrical engineers, we've got incredible combustion engineers or air conditioning engineers in the business, but they still require a level of continual upskill, and they still are using SME expertise in supply chain to be able to bring that to us. So sometimes the best managers are the ones who can bring that group together, not necessarily. So look, I think that, to answer your question directly, I think, there are moments where, it's the right time to pull in experts versus trying to fake it till you make it. Some people are great at faking it till you make it, but I think if you've got a very strong knowledge of what's around you and you've got a good SME group, I don't think that makes as much of a difference at the moment. Some of our best contract managers now, we have some incredible engineering focused account managers, some really strong leaders, but actually some of the new up and comers we have, especially those doing full FM, soft services and hard services, those who come from more that kind of hospitality, customer service. I mentioned it right at the beginning, what Johnson Controls saw when I fumbled through that customer, that presentation. It's they see behind that of the traits that sit going through. And actually, I don't think that has to naturally be, the expertise in every service. They're looking for all-round leaders who can communicate and anticipate.
No, absolutely. I think it's all about transferable skills,
Some of my leaders still take the mick, Claudio, that I'm not an engineer, but I almost like being the not-engineer in the room.
No, fair enough, Otherwise, you'll get pulled into the plan room to try and fix something. There's such a skill shortage. You might have to roll your sleeves up. But so who did you look up to throughout kind of Johnson's and CBRE? Did you have you had mentors over the years? What are your thoughts? What are your kind of experiences with mentors?
I've been really lucky. I genuinely have been really lucky, and hopefully some of my mentors get a chance to listen into this so I can give them a bit of kudos. But I guess one thing that I have been lucky throughout my career is that I've had incredible managers throughout. Not just managers, but people who've been inspirational, people who've supported me through my career, and people who now I call friends, and I still chat to them on a regular basis. I still look to them for advice. There's one leader I had for a long period called Juan Pablo. He was one of the global account leaders for a number of accounts that I ran. And, even still we meet every few weeks, and he still kind of is a great life coach, even out for things outside of work. And I think it's really important that you keep those people around you. As I progressed through, I had a leader called Alex Bullen, who now he works for a global FM company as one of the largest EMEA account directors. Super analytical mind. When I chat to him, it's about those sorts of conversations. He was the one who kind of helped me with interpreting things in different ways. I had leaders like a chap called Mike Runicles, who's COO of a global real estate firm now that he left the company I was with. And again, still gives me incredible focus and leadership when I need it. He's a good ear for me. And then even now with BGIS, our global CEO, Gord Hicks, is, if you get chance to ever look him up, he's an incredible global leader. He just actually received the equivalent of a knighthood in Canada for his work on sustainability. It's called the Order of Canada. But for his work on sustainability and youth mental health, and helped start a large charity supporting youth mental health. We also have the chairman of our board, a chap called Greg Brenneman, who has been a Fortune 500 leader for Burger King, Continental Airlines. He's the chairman of the board he's on the board of directors for Home Depot, and has run a number of other large companies. So, it's having the leaders is great, but it's about being able to use those kind of leaders for the bits where they add real value, and keep those connections. It's important that you don't lose those connections, and whether it is a coffee catch up every few months, or even if from across the world it's once a year, it's building that network around you of people that we're not all experts. We like to think we are, but there's a lot of good people out there to rely on. There's a wonderful lady in the UK called Sajna, who is a customer service leader, who I ask for advice for a lot when it comes to customer service leaderships, and she's helped me through a number of challenges with kind of developing my team when it comes to the leadership and customer service capabilities. We have a member of our global leadership team called Laurie Rowlandson, who's a incredible IFMA leader, and Rebecca Brain, our chief commercial officer, and Tara, who's our CFO. So it's leveraging that network is really important, but also being at a point now where I can give advice back also helps a little bit.
Nice. And do you mentor people as well? Do you have time to mentor people?
Yeah, it's the part of the role I enjoy. It's the part of the role I enjoy. If you ask me the metric that I'd want to be measured on the most, it would be how many people have been promoted through the business. That's the part of the job Brilliant. The P&L is important, and compliance is of course up there, and safety and customer satisfaction and all those good metrics. But for me, mentorship is key. We have a mentorship program in our business, but it's having someone. I guess it's having someone you can chat to. Your line manager is always great, and it's funny that a lot of my mentors have been my line managers. So I'm probably going away from my own advice now, but your line manager is great, but at the end of the day, there's a line management direct responsibility and accountability there that,
Yeah.
There's things you want to be able to talk to and get advice maybe before you go to your manager, right? So, my peers who look after the other regions in BGIS, they become my mentors because I want to chat to them on a regular basis to make sure that, am I moving in the right direction? Sometimes you don't necessarily want to look silly in front of your boss if you're asking, questions you might feel that you should have the answer for already, but pushing those things around your peers is always pretty good, right? So,
Yeah.
And it makes the job a lot easier, Claudio. It makes the job, if you've got people around you that are mentoring you, and the mentor doesn't have to always be someone more senior. I like surrounding myself by actually people who are my peer group,
Right.
and having them mentor me a little bit, because, they're going through the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
They're going through the same challenges you are, whether it's other people who run companies, M&E FM companies in the UK. There's some really fantastic leaders. Tom Lloyd, who runs Principal Cleaning. People like that who are really great leaders in their field in the UK. And having people like that you can connect with on the regular is. So I try and mentor as much as I can. I'm part of a new program called Tomorrow Meets Today, which is about mentorship in FM, and I try and mentor a number of our employees, and we do a lot of skip levels. That's always quite a good thing to do, which is, spending time with the reports of my direct reports to give them more into what's going on in the business, so they're a bit more bought into what we're trying to achieve, rather than that just filtering directly through the managers in the team. It actually comes directly from me and the other members of my leadership. So that.
Brilliant. It's nice. It's great that you do that, and I think it's so important to help kind of with employee retention as well. If you can offer these programs and promotions, and you're good at promoting from within and mentoring, because I think obviously I work in recruitment, and I hear a lot of effort and money gets spent on recruitment when I think companies could probably do more at the other end and retain more. On the retention side.
That. It's funny you say that. I was helping one of our P&C heads with our people and culture heads with a presentation yesterday, and the topic of the presentation was about, how do we attract more people into FM? And actually, it's funny you say it, because actually the direct chat we had was about, actually let's not focus on how we bring more people into FM. Let's focus on why people like being in FM, and why people leave FM. So, why do we have attrition in FM? Why do people choose to leave the industry? Was a big topic we talked about, and then the other topic was, why do people stay? It's because there's a lot of career paths you can maneuver into. It's flexible from that perspective. There's a lot of places you can change, and it's a very kind of good industry from a developmental perspective. And we talked about that and said, let's take the good and the bad and say, well, actually, that's how we attract people in, not just going, yep, we need to get into schools. We need to get in at ground level when it brings, talking about youth bringing in, but, ultimately to be what makes FM interesting to be part of.
Yeah.
And what are the bad things, what is not correct in FM? What do we need to look to fix as leaders? For example, one of the things we talked about, Claudio, is that, when you come into FM, the benefits that come with salary tend to be less than the industry.
Yeah.
When you look at maternity and paternity and all these sorts of things, but actually it's changing really quickly, and we're becoming closer to where the fintech companies are and the financial insurance companies are, and it's developing that little bit and making sure that we've ticked that why do people leave box, and focusing more on the why do people really enjoy being part of FM, which is why I like this podcast, is because it's real stories from real people who've developed. And actually, most people you chat to, Claudio, the funny thing is, most people you chat to in FM have all came ground up.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
It is brilliant, and I think over the years, over 20 years in recruitment, I've spoken to senior people, some who started out on the tools, people who started out maybe on front of house or in the post room. It's brilliant. I think it's there for the taking if you put it in. It's the classic, you get out what you put in. And I think it's one of those industries that, if you put your mind to it and get the right people around you, and you're driven and you want to do it, then it's a great industry to be in. No, it's really good. And I think it's interesting what you said about the retention. And I think if you've got like happy workforce as well, and you focus on the people that you've got there, they can be your marketers and promoting, why they should work for your company, and then people will come knocking on your door. Instead of you having to go out to recruit, it's like the recruitment's done by your employees who are saying, listen, I work for this company, it's brilliant, I've got these great benefits, I've got this flexibility of this promotion, and this structured career path, all these things. There's so much. Retention is probably doing myself out of a job, really.
No, look, there's always, we find that with word of mouth, and we have an incentive program that if you refer a friend, and actually we find often that retention within that is really strong. And you hit the nail on the head when you said, you look at the likes of Google and Facebook within the technology sector, or you look at those prominent within the banking sector, or in the consultancy, in the consultancy sector, you've got the kind of big three. People like that's where I want to be, and it tends to be, it's the name, it's the incentives, it's the salary and the comp, but also it's, for us, I think that it's the last bit, which is the maneuverability is so great within FM. I mean, you can, if you want to be a project manager, there's a pathway to be a project manager. You want to go into finance, we've got 4 contract supports or administrators currently doing their CIMA, right? So they're doing their chartership to become accountants with the business. So we've got 3 people doing an MBA, and it's that ability to go, actually, if I want to step into management, actually, this is how I career path it through. And sometimes it's not always super clear within other sectors. I think we need to make it more clear within FM. Career pathways is a really good way to bring more people in, especially with the way tech is going in the industry, and the way that, we've got building automation and prop tech is becoming so prominent. It's showing the pathway to that. Like having apprenticeship programs where you're saying, right, you start in year 1 and year 2 and year 3, and this is the places you can maneuver. You want to be a project manager or an account manager, you want to be a finance manager or an analytics person. You can do all that within FM. There's no real kind of boundary on it.
So you mentioned prop tech just then. For people who don't know, and me included, I kind of, my focus is a lot obviously on recruitment and people, but how has the industry changed over the years since you've been in it? What prop tech is there out there now that your business is using or implementing, or that's kind of making that's the future, basically?
It's funny, the fundamentals of the industry haven't really changed. For me, in the last 15 years, like the building blocks haven't changed substantially. It is, having a clean, well lit, well maintained space to work in. The major pieces that have changed is around the style and design and the flexibility within space. You see a big change in more colo spaces coming into the market a lot more, especially post-COVID. You've got a need for it to be more of a hub to meet and engage, rather than necessarily having a static traditional desk like you'd have probably 15, 20 years ago. The bit for us that's changing is obviously decarbonisation and sustainability is a major focus. Most of our clients are committed to 2030 net zero carbon strategies, and a lot of that is going to be around technology, replacing assets within a building, consolidating their spaces down, and coming up with new ways of thinking to drive down their carbon. Offsetting isn't just the norm anymore. People want to go to true net zero, and they've made commitments to do that. And a lot of the infrastructure is old, right? So there's a real race to, be at the forefront of being a sustainability leader. A big piece that we focus on is health in buildings. We have a program inside BGIS called Blue Zones. There is a there's an amazing documentary on Netflix you should watch. It's around blue zones within the world, and it's about the cities in the world that have the most people who live to 100.
Someone told me, I was talking about this the other day. Someone mentioned it to me the other day, actually, because we were talking about what to watch, what's everybody talking about, and someone mentioned this, actually. It was my colleague.
Yeah, and if you can imagine, if you think about why is it in those spaces that most people live to 100, and there's an individual's travelled there and kind of consolidated it down to a list to say, these are the fundamental reasons. It's about community. It's about the air and food we ingest and the water we ingest and that kind of sense of belonging. So how do we bring that into a building? Because we're spending the majority of our time within the spaces that we work within, right? 8, 10, 12 hours a day, depending on your role. And so it's important that how do we bring some of the healthy concepts into the workplace? How do we make sure that the air quality is improved? How do we make sure the water quality is improved? How do we make sure we bring, even from a mechanical and electrical perspective, how do we ensure everything we do links to health and well-being of the employees, whether that's in cleaning using non-toxic chemicals to clean the space, making sure that we have healthy options within cafeterias and vending machines, etc. Making sure that we're delivering a sense of community through classes and things like that on site, which bring people together and actually bring all of those parts of the puzzle together. And actually what you're saying is we're improving long-term health of people when they're in the office. And, you sit in central London where we've got the congestion zone and, pollution levels are up. It's really important that we're making sure that the air circulated and within the buildings is. So we're looking at a lot of tech around that space is a big focus. And then prop tech we talk about a lot, which is making our buildings more efficient and operate more effectively through the use of technology, whether that is using QR codes to now tap in from an access perspective, whether that is digital apps where you're part of a community and I have a great app from a building in the city which talks to me about what's going on and the community events and how I book a deck and how I book a space, especially when space is becoming more limited in the city. People are choosing to have less space post-COVID and change the style of desk space is becoming much more reduced. So how do we have tech around managing that? And we as a business, in terms of BGIS in the UK, we have a big focus on data-led maintenance, which is really around, we have a traditional way of looking at maintenance, which you must maintain it 1/12 4 times a year. But actually, if we can use the BMS or sensor technology or other tech that's provided to look at, do we need to send an engineer there? So not only do we not need to fulfill the task, but we're also saving the carbon on sending an engineer out to deliver that task, while still maintaining a compliant and well-maintained building, but managing that digitally. We're not only improving cost management, but we're also able to drive a really increased level of sustainability. That's a big focus as a kind of more hard service-led company, which is how can we improve the level of building management through data and through analytics. And a big push for that for us, just to close off, is around improving and upskilling our staff to be able to use more technology-led tools. How do you integrate a building management system, for example? And how do we upskill them to be able to do that, to be able to support it? It's great having tech in, but you still need the engineers to be able to understand and interpret what's coming out of the tech.
And what do you ever get? Because obviously we recruit for engineers, and there's the skills shortage. There's been a skills shortage for quite some time now, and I always talk about how the best mechanical engineers are kind of in the age group, kind of probably late 40s to 70, and there's kind of like there's a real, everybody wants to be an electrician. Mechanical front is kind of, there's a real gap. You can almost see it. There's a block of a decade of people in their 30s that few and far between who do HVAC or go and study it. But my point is that with the older guys, the older engineers, do you find that they push back when you're trying to say, right, we need to learn this new technology, it's going to make your job easier, this is what we're implementing? Do you find that the people are kind of pushing back on that? Because I remember when the PDA handhelds first came out, and everything was going from paper led and kind of this is where your jobs go from here to now being on here. And I remember guys going, "Oh, I don't want to use that. I don't even have a mobile phone." This was going back maybe a decade or so. But how is it? How is it now?
I don't think as much as people think it is.
Right.
Actually,
okay.
Interesting. I get that question a lot. It's funny. I get that question. Yeah. And it's and you're right. You look at where people are within their career, and actually technology, how do you attract more engineers? Actually, I think we focus more on the technology part, because that's the bit that's exciting, that's a bit that's sexy to people who want to come into the industry, and bringing more youngsters through.
Totally, yeah.
Actually having that technology focus with inside apprenticeships is a really interesting part, and something that we deliver in terms of building performance apprenticeships rather than necessarily traditional mechanical electrical. It's funny with the older generation. You have to be careful on what age gap we talk about there. But with our older generation, you're right. That's probably where the most sit within our demographic from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
And we've found that I think what makes people nervous is, am I doing this to be able to cut cost and therefore save engineering time, right?
Yeah.
So why do we bring tech in? It's to make efficiencies. That's why we find on the change management curve, people get a little bit nervous, because it's almost like we're training people to be out of a job, because we can have a system diagnostically check another system rather than needing a traditional engineer to check it. But actually, if you put it as the approach is we can upskill in other areas, that's what people like, right? It's about learn the tech to be able to improve our output by 20%, but let's use that 20% to do something else. And that's the bit which may be more traditional, right? Which may not have a technology, fire door inspections, for example, or, there's bits which, technology is never going to necessarily disrupt, or certainly not at the moment. But we use our tech and we say, well, right, actually, let's learn the tech to be more efficient and learn a new skill, but actually, on the residual time that we save, it gives an opportunity to upskill in other areas. And funnily enough, with engineers who want to kind of be more hands-on, that's the cool part of it, is we can say, well, actually, the tech helps do these bits, which are a bit more mundane. Probably the wrong word, but a bit more kind of repetitive. Yeah. And actually, let's use that time to upskill you, which is a bit more kind of hands-on. That's accepted really well. So it's about the narrative of why we use the tech, which is tech enables us to remove some of the repetitive nature of the delivery. Yeah. And then we use that time and we upskill to do more of the kind of things that people enjoy. Most of my engineers love getting their hands dirty, literally sometimes. And if we can use tech to drive that benefit to allow them to upskill, actually the engagement's been really high.
That's brilliant. It's good to hear.
I get it a lot. And actually, I think it's sometimes it's how you spin the narrative on it. And actually, it's about giving people more time. Why just go and manually inspect something when we could be using that time to be able to, and then you feel like you have to do the permit to work and you do the risk assessment. And if we can do some level of, and sign off the work order and go into the CAFM system and close it off and do your QHSE part, if we can remove some of that capability through digital means and use that time to upskill people where they want to be, which is in the plant room, delivering work, then that's what people get excited about.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's interesting because I think, I recall it was a decade, possibly more, when the handhelds were first coming out, and only a few companies had them, but now everybody's got them. But at that point, I remember a generation were like, I'm not sure about this.
You still get it. I mean, it's not gone completely.
No,
I'm not saying it's eradicated. We definitely have a few tech in the business, but it's how you it's all about how they see it from their perspective, which is is the change of tech going to change and impact my role in terms of am I needed anymore? And actually. The industry is not about that. It's about saying, well, the tech is there to improve efficiency, and we can take that efficiency gap and use it elsewhere. And our view is use that to upskill. And actually, people do actually genuinely enjoy learning new things.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are scared of AI. as well. I think when people mention AI or technology, it worries people. I think, do you know what I mean? Like I say, it's how you spin the narrative. I think a lot of it is people will always say, well, it's just going to make my job redundant, And I think people get a bit concerned about that. With all this data-led maintenance and stats, you must be in your element, right? Because isn't this what you studied all the way back at university? Analytics and that kind of thing.
It's fun. It's a bit. It's the bit that keeps it fun. It's the bit I get to do a little bit less of these days. But when I get the chance to crack open a spreadsheet, I do quite enjoy it. I can still, and my team would say, but it's more of the people side I like now.
Yeah.
It's the developmental piece. It's the seeing people flourish in the team. That's the bit that gets me more excited.
And do you get to go to Canada much? How often do you have to go to HQ?
We're a decarb focused business, Claudio. So we.
Oh right, okay.
It's the one cool thing I really like about BGIS. Although there's many. The one thing I really like about BGIS is that, we really get to operate the business here in the UK how we want to operate the business here in the UK. But we have this amazing SME infrastructure globally. And we get the technology, we get the expertise. Imagine being, the size we are today of around 600 employees, but getting access to this kind of 10,000 group plus, which is where we've got multiple SMEs in sustainability or multiple project managers, or, we need some spillover to support us with mobilization. That's the really great draw from BGIS, is that it's this is the support I need rather than this is the support that's pushed down. And you see that a lot within companies. It's all about that kind of community piece, and that's what Grad, our CEO, really strives for, which is everybody being there to support each other rather than this kind of view of, this is how you must do it. One of our kind of values is kind of passion for innovation, and it gives everybody the opportunity to put their innovation ideas forward globally. And we have a globally innovation call every month where engineers, administrators, finance leaders can come on and say, this is something I've came up with. And if that's taken well, it's loaded as a global innovation and people can have access. And then we start to invest in rolling that out with our customers and inside our business. And it gives people a voice at a global table, which is quite fun as well.
Brilliant. So listen, we're going to finish off soon. We've been chatting for, I think, about 47 minutes. It's gone quite quick. But you're clearly passionate about what you do and the company you work for now. What advice would you give to somebody that's kind of just entering the industry and they may have fallen into it, or they might be kind of starting out and think, where is this going to lead? What advice would you give them to kind of hopefully become successful, make a success of the industry?
I'll tell you what I do, and I've given this advice to a few people in who I mentor, which is I always took the job spec of the person whose job I wanted in the future, right? So that was one thing that's really helped me, because what I was able to do is, let's say I'm a junior FM and I want to be a facilities manager. I want to manage a bunch of buildings. How do I get to that point, right? And a bit of it needs to be self-motivation. I think that, as much as you're going to get support around you, I think you have to drive your own course a little bit as part of this. I don't think just sit and anticipate that, everything is going to be handed to you. You need to have a level of self-motivation inside of it if you want to develop. And part of what I did is I'd get the job spec of the role that I wanted, and I would take a highlighter and I would say, what can I do? What can I not do? And what can I do middle-ish? And then on the what can I not do's, I would sit and work with my manager on the what can I not do's, right? So let's say I'm an assistant facilities manager and I want to be an FM. Maybe finance is a big part, managing a budget. That's new to a lot of people. Okay, well, let's work with our manager. Let's sit in a couple of budget meetings. Let's go on finance for non-finance training. And it's not all about external courses. It's more about what you learn on the job. So go and sit while your manager writes the budget and just sit and ingest and poke and ask questions. And at the end of it, you should be able to go, I can green that now. People management. It might not be a people manager. Do you mind if I mentor someone? Can I go on a leadership course? Can I, can I in some of your team meetings so I can see, and then I can tick that box. So when it comes to kind of, I'm able to say, I can demonstrate these things now. And I think that shows well for someone who wants to grow in their career. You know, is it Matthew McConaughey did a famous speech, I think at the Oscars, where he said, who do you look up to? And it said, it's me in 10 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
Then it's a bit like that. It's about going, and when I get to that person, I ask again, who's your mentor? And I say, me again in another 10 years.
Yeah.
It's that same sort of concept, which is, you know, where do I want to be next? Where do I fundamentally not have the experience today? Build your professional development around those areas. Okay, continue to enhance the areas that you're good. Focus on the areas where you think you need to develop, and use that and the best advice, career, like external courses are great, and I definitely promote them. Like peer-to-peer mentorship, engagement, and wider industry resources, there's where you get the most experience. So, you know, people like yourself, Claudio, and others who are within the UK or within your own team, sit in a meeting, listen in. You don't necessarily need to just listen how a budget's managed, listen how people lead a team session. That is sometimes more valuable than necessarily going on, because it gives you that, of course, because that practical. So that would probably be mine. It's like, you know, see where you aspire to be, and be very. There's a book. If I leave it on this file, there's a book called True North. It's by a writer called Bill George.
Okay.
I base my leadership on that book, which it's all about authentic leadership. It's all about, you know, knowing where you're good, knowing where you're bad. It's all about managing with authenticity. It's truth, transparency, and trust are the big fundamentals inside of it. And, you know, knowing where your gaps are and not trying to kind of I can't think of another word, but blag your way through them. But actually know where your gaps are, be honest where your gaps are, but be able to work with your manager and people around you to bridge those gaps. And that will really help you succeed. And it shows real initiative that, you know, I'm taking my own career in my own hands. I'm using the network around me. Don't be afraid to use the network around you. Like there's people who are still much more experienced than I am, and I still leverage them today. Because I know where my gaps are. So I leverage those around me. So the people who fail the most are the people who keep themselves very insular. When you're on FM and you're on a building, sometimes it can be isolating because you're on a building as part of a wider group. Keep the network up. Don't isolate yourself, and use the resources within the business and the wider kind of industry. And that's the people, you know, all the successful leaders of some of the M&E and the FM companies around us, they're all the ones who are able to kind of use that group and know where they need to develop into. They're the ones who've done incredibly well. Yeah,
brilliant. Good advice. Does that mean that you've got Gordon Hicks's job spec in front of you, and you
I think I've got. Well, I would never put myself on the same pedestal as Gord. He's
brilliant.
He's a one in a million, and a very kind of, you can't learn some of that stuff. He's got an innate ability to kind of really entice a room, and he can. Yeah. You know, after some of the meetings with him, it's like you come out and it's like, yeah, I can do this. I can, you know, and he's got such a fantastic ability around that. So brilliant. Maybe in the future, you know.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting guy. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast one day. Brilliant. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thanks for taking the time. You're clearly passionate about what you do. You've had a great career, interesting kind of progression, the way it's been kind of international, and you've really kind of grasped that opportunity and you've seen it and run with it. So it's a great example to people out there, hopefully, that will kind of listen in and go, yeah, that's inspiring, you know. So
I read the authentic, so I'm too humble to take that. But no, I really appreciate it, and thank you for everything you're doing, Claudio, to kind of awareness in the industry. It's really
nice,
really
one.
Cool.
Well, listen, we'll catch up soon. Yeah, thanks for your time, and speak soon. Cheers, Gary.
Thank you. Thanks, Claudio.
Take care.